Welcome to the Civic Pulse. It's June 14th, 2026. I'm Brian Brady here with former Congressman David Bonior, my political hero, and my educational hero, Michael Matsuda, the former superintendent of Anaheim Union High School District. Welcome, you guys. How are you doing today?
Good.
Good. Yeah. Greetings.
It's fun to be able to have a show and just invite your heroes onto it. It's a fun thing to do on Sunday morning.
Yeah, and shoot the baloney, right? Yeah.
Shoot the baloney. We're the alternative to Meet the Press and Trump talking points, etc. Hey, a lot of things happening in the news. We're going to interview Mike about the future of public education in this country and where the Democrats, how they can build that into a winning issue and also move education in the right way. But we're going to first just do a quick roundtable on the current events. It's actually been a slightly slower news week than normal. Usually the world's falling down every Sunday. But we might have a peace deal, David. Do you think this peace deal will actually get signed?
I don't know. We were supposed to have a peace deal months ago, right? And every time I turn on the TV or read a publication that's talking about this issue, the president says, well, it's just right there. We're going to get it done. It's almost done. And then, the Iranians say we're not even in discussions yet. So I suspect it's going to happen because the Iranians are starting to really feel the pinch with regard to their economy, and they've got to do something. And I suspect it will happen. But a lot of the pieces that the U.S. wanted in this frame that they're been chatting about, they're not going to get. I mean, they've got to. It's down the road, so they've got to work out all the spent fuel stuff, the renunciation. All of that's not in, as I understand it, in the agreement. So we got a long way to go on this. There's a nice, interesting piece today. I don't know if it was in the New York Times or the Washington Post about how Russia and the United States, these superpowers, really aren't superpowers in many ways. And these two wars kind of highlight that.
Mm-hmm.
That these countries, that Ukraine, obviously, and then Iran, they when you're defending your homeland, there's a huge difference rather than being on the attack. I mean, the Russians are on the attack, and they've been on the attack now for 400 years. I'm a Ukrainian American, Mike, so and I wear this every day to remind me it's the symbol of Ukraine. And I've been working on this issue for quite a bit of time now. And the Ukrainians are steadfast, they're resilient, they're tough, and they have a new generation of people who are open-minded and very smart and sophisticated, not just only on technology, but on basic moral values, which is the other thing the Russians don't have. And they're run by a war criminal in an autocracy. So you've got this disconnect with what I think what people really want, and so I think the Ukrainians are doing very well, and I think the Iranians, well, I'm not going to say they're doing very well. They have found a way to stop Trump.
Asymmetrical warfare. Mike, what's your thoughts from Anaheim, California, about all this? And plus, you have to tell us if your elections really are rigged, like Donald Trump says in California. Joking, of course.
Well, from the ground, I think people are just going to ask, are we better off or worse off before or after the war? And I think it's very obvious country's worse off. So that's it's just a basic question. What was this for? And I think in terms of the question or the accusations, the false accusations of the rigged election, it's California is we try to ensure that elections are fair, and in terms of the absentees that come in by the mail, those are the ones that we make sure that every vote is counted. So the pattern that the president has tried to think, linked to some sort of rigged election, that's that's a joke, right? And Californians know it. It's just it's a real joke. And actually, Hilton, the GOP top runner for the governor, has acknowledged that Californians' elections are fair and free elections.
Yeah.
With the Weasley New York Times, like the day after the election, comes out with an op-ed saying, "Oh, California really needs to speed up its counting," and instead of just calling BS on this, blatant lie. I think, David, is it possible we could get a law? I want to introduce this, and maybe you can call one of your Congress people friends, that intentionally defaming the electoral process or lying about the electoral process being stolen or whatever becomes an offense, becomes a criminal offense, because they're basically undermining the whole democratic process by under
Yeah, well,
have that kind of law. There might be nuts.
well, you could do it. You could try, but there is free speech in this country, and people have a right to do or say what they want and believe what they want. More importantly, and so yeah, it wouldn't go anywhere because of the free speech piece. But it should be talked about the way you're talking about it, the way Mike talked about it. That counting the votes correctly is significant. I mean, that's what this is supposedly all about. People who don't count the votes, the Putins of the world, some of our dictators in other areas in Latin America and other places, Asia, it's pretty obvious, and they have very little international credibility, and they suffer from that in terms of access and openness into trade deals and other pieces that are important to their people and their economy. So, it's I know what you're talking about, Brian, but
you probably could sue them if he defamed the actual election administrator, right? If it was an individual, you said he's stealing the election, then that individual could probably file suit against Trump, et cetera, right? Like the ballot counters did against Fox News, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you that, but I suspect you could probably get to court. Some judge would probably take it, and what the outcome of it will be, I don't know. But the president had defamed. I can't forget her name, but she won a lot of money, and she won court. And so we'll see.
Carroll.
Yeah, Jean Carroll. Thank you.
Well, let's pivot. Arnie Duncan. We wanted to get Superintendent Matsuda on the show, who, in my mind, he ran the Anaheim Union High School District, about 25,000 students, 20 schools, probably one of the top 3 visionary, accomplished superintendents the last 10 years, in really moving his system to the 21st century model, I think, for education. And has a new book called The Future of Public Education with Barnett Berry and Michael Fullen, the famous Michael Fullen. And if you're an educator, you know who Fullen is. And Mike, I'd love to dive in. Arnie Duncan, to what the we're Democrats here. You don't have to tell us what you are here, but we're lefty Dems on this show. It doesn't seem. Arnie Duncan said that the Democrats have no education plan and that the Republicans are stealing this issue from them. And so we were like, we got to get one of the best educators out here to tell us what our education plan should be, and how we can win, in part by pointing to a vision for education. So tell us, I'm going to push you to start. Your brain moves in the future a lot. I want to go back to 2012. I didn't know you then, but Anaheim had 7 murders of young people, mostly Latino people. And the city of joy and happiness and Disney started to have kind of an uprising, right? And you at that time were in middle management in Anaheim Union, right? Running curriculum and development. Can you take us back to that time? And then from there, what happens there kind of propels you a little bit into the superintendent chair. But can you tell us that story a little bit?
Well, those are 7 murders in the course of less than 2 years by the Anaheim Police Department. So, and the last 2, one of them was allegedly an execution style. I mean, it was in the barrio. The young Latino boy who may have been a gang member was hogtied was not a, I mean, you know, they had him, right? But yet he was shot and allegedly in the back of the head. And that created a response, a riot, a disturbance. And the city, which is really in the shadow of Disneyland, was out of control. And it made national news. The mayor then, Tom Tate, a Republican businessman who ran on a campaign centered on kindness, and he meant it, led a response with myself, as you said, a middle manager at the district, to really meet with many of the kids who were very just like today. I mean, there's so many young people who are disconnected and questioning, and there's anger. There's a lot of anger about the system. And we met with hundreds of them and over the course of a few weeks in small healing circles, in which they basically expressed that they had no future. There were 10 generational gangs in Anaheim, and they wanted jobs. And the mayor responded to say, look, I am going to try to work with the district on getting you better prepared for job and connecting with some of the business folks here in the city. And he said, look, I know you hear a lot from, you know, suited white people like myself, and gives you promises, and I want you to hold me accountable. And I was blown away that this man meant it. And he, when I became superintendent a year later, he and I built what became the region's most robust partnership with business. We ended up with 130 of them. We started with 6, and the kids were wanted. So what that meant is that they wanted more skills and more connection, not just access to jobs, but more skills. We called it the 5 C's: collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking. And it's interesting because the kids themselves brought in
character and compassion are sort of your 5th one.
the 5th one, because they said, look, at the Nazis had 4 C's. They were very efficient with those 4 C's, but they really didn't give a shit about people. And they wanted empathy, and that evolved to compassion because we were looking for a C. And so the rest is history, because it was really education from the ground up, which I think is part of the problem now, because education has been imposed by people like Arnie Duncan. So from our perspective, education priorities have been, there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats. It's been from the top down, focusing on traditional test scores and testing. And that has created, especially by high school, a sense of that disconnectedness and boredom and irrelevance.
Mike, you made 2 moves early in your tenure as superintendent, and that I think were really critical. And I'd love to hear, you know, I want to get into the teachers union aspect and get David's opinion on how you can, you know, make deals with the teachers unions in order to move things forward. And Mike has an expert, but you built the Anaheim Collaborative with Tom Tate, right? Which built, really put the community into the district, right? And then you also de-emphasized testing as much as you could, and still comply with state law. Can you tell us about those 2? Because you know those are pretty radical things I don't see happening many places. Those two moves.
Well, the collaborative is really about framing education as a community goal, right? And it's a precursor to this big movement on community schools. Community schools have been around for a long time, but in California, it's really a big deal now. We can talk about that. But the collaborative is an intentional agreements with higher ed, community college, Cal State and UC, as well as some of the business interests and nonprofits. And so you create a cross-sector intentionality about education. And that is, it does reflect the concept of subsidiarity, which Jerry Brown brought in through the local control accountability plan for education, which is really democracy, if you think about that, from the ground up, where you have
The Pope likes subsidiarity too, right? So similar listening from
yes,
the ground,
and
right?
folks,
David's a former almost Catholic priest there, so he's into this too.
yeah, it's a Jesuit
Jesuit term, right?
construct, right? And it's really, we could talk about the Pope's views on artificial intelligence, which I think is based on subsidiarity.
Yeah.
But the other piece is the moving beyond the testing, because the teachers on the ground knew that this was a problem, especially in middle and higher and secondary. I mean, arguably, numeracy and literacy is vital in primary, but once the whole testing culture in reading in two areas, I mean, what it did, I think, was narrow the curriculum to reading and to what's tested, right?
Yeah.
And the whole culture is about testing, and the accountability is about testing. Teacher evaluation is about test scores. So
that whole child
over 30 years, and the Obama administration, that's one thing. When Obama was elected, people in education felt that, hey, we're going to finally get a relief from No Child Left Behind. And under Arnie Duncan, it actually got worse. So that's where there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats when it comes to education policy. And this is a big problem now. And this is one reason why 70% of high school seniors are bored with their education. They think it's irrelevant. And much of that is because of democratic education policy.
So Mike, Dave, I'm going to ask you to put this into a political campaign message, but tell us what the new North Star for education should be in this country. If it's not, right now, the Trump administration, it's school choice, it's putting the 10 Commandments up in schools, it's school vouchers to undermine, it's anti-teachers union, it's testing is the metric for measuring everything. What should the Democrats' North Star on education be? What should we be selling? And we know it's not the factory model of education from the 20th century. So what is the new North Star for education, you think, Mike, that we should be campaigning on?
Well, you touched upon it in terms of the collaborative and the 5 C's, right? It is a North Star that builds the human capacity and positions young people to be ready for this very uncertain future around jobs, around agency. That's this whole small d democratic civic engagement, so this is what the Civic Pulse is about. And I think that's where we need to go. It's about the cultivation of human capacity and talent. And if we make that the North Star, we can move from a culture of scarcity, top 10% kids get into the top schools, to 100% of talent. And I think that's the culture of abundance.
I'm in a wealthy town called Evanston, right? College town. And we have a kind of an award-winning high school, Evanston High School, because a lot of kids go off to the Ivy League schools from here. But if you look under the hood, and this is true around the country, even in the 25% of kids don't go to college, 50% of them don't graduate from college. You made a point of saying a good job is social justice, and some of your high school grads are like getting jobs as coders because you have a whole biotech program, digital program. How do you fight back against the people who say you're just dumbing things down? Like what assessment mechanisms did you use to make your case that no, our kids really are achieving? How do you prove that?
Well, two things. I mean, dumbing it down. Like, you think about the 5 C's. How do you teach that? How do you model that? That's a lot harder than looking for the right answer on a multiple test. Yeah. Being able to collaborate and communicate both orally and written. On the back end, what that looks like in the classroom is a soapbox speech, a TED Talk, right? You think about a TED Talk, and this is where, Brian, your influence on education around these durable skills is huge in agency. You think the audience knows what a TED Talk is, and what the soapbox speech is, a truncated TED Talk. That's a very complicated strategy, right? There's a lot of iteration, there's a lot of writing involved in TED Talks, a lot of thinking, critical thinking, and a lot of agency in terms of telling your story. This is my story, and these are my issues, and I've done the research, and this is why what I recommend regarding policy. And I think that's a huge shift in terms of the instructional direction we need to go with education. So, and then on the assessment side, we were very lucky that folks like the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation and other big foundations, Hewlett Foundation, wanted to fund research with UCI on how do we capture the 5 Cs. Now a lot of big, private players are in this space because there's like a race to capture the how do we measure durable skills, right? And what I fear is that becomes another top-down imposition, right? That, to do collaboration, you got to do it this way, and this is the way it's going to be tested. And I think this is where AI, the fear of the Pope and his encyclical, and what he's talking about is if it's top-down, AI, if it's imposed from the top, like the Tower of Babel, which is a metaphor in the Old Testament, a story of hubris. This man attempt to become God, and does it become top-down? And I think that is a very powerful metaphor as we talk about how do we capture durable skills in this the 5 Cs. And if it's done by corporate America, it's going to be imposed on educators too.
Mike, I always thought the way you shut people up the most when they said was your college success rates. That your kids, even though they were oftentimes marginalized kids, low-income kids, were graduating from getting in and graduating from the California college system at a higher rate than comparable districts, and even higher, SES districts. Did you feel like that was the best critique, best answer to your critics who said, you're removing interim testing, how can you do that?
I think too, yes. Our kids are outperforming. I mean, if you look at our test scores, they're average based on our demography, right? Nothing special. But if you look at the persistence rates and GPAs of our students at the University of California, Cal State University Fullerton, even at community college, significantly higher than affluent students, mostly white and Asian, in Orange County that go to UC Irvine and Cal State Fullerton. And that's a huge point in terms of the affirmation of our North Star. But I think the second thing is that, like, I get feedback from, like, I got an email just out of the blue from a professor at UCLA who noted that and he's had a few Anaheim kids, and he was wondering what's going on over there. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, your kids know a lot about their local communities, and they can articulate the issues about housing and the access to healthcare, things that we would hope every kid at UCLA would know something about. But unfortunately, 95% of kids at UCLA don't even know what's going on in their local communities, but yours do. And that really goes back to what I said earlier.
Does that take up the last point you just touched on? I think really critical, the knowing what's going on in your own community. And of course, you were right. What MICVA Challenge did, and Brian as a leader in MICVA Challenge did, is open that up to just a whole new audience of young people, mostly of backgrounds that weren't white, affluent, suburban. And it really, I think, is a really key piece, what you've been doing and what Brian has done in this education reform piece. And for instance, I tried to get the Congress to pass some legislation that would uh, have more civics involvement, get kids involved in the civics of their community, in their education. And, we haven't had any movement on that. I shouldn't say we haven't had any movement. Rosa DeLauro and some people are working very hard, and they have had movement. But there's so much more we could do in that area. I mean, you've got these young people in these schools. Why not use what you have to expose them to what's available in the community? They're the future of the community. And maybe that's what your professor at UCLA was talking about. And it's exciting for them to be knowing that someone cares about what they're thinking, but wants them to be part of making change and making change in a positive direction. So I think that's a very important ingredient in all of this that's missing. I've always thought, for instance, and I'll stop here, is that we should find some way to allow our high school seniors, maybe juniors, but certainly seniors, to participate and vote.
Mm-hmm.
Not till you're 18, but while you're in school. So you learn all those processes of getting involved in a political debate, in involvement in your community. And so anyway, that's just my thought on what
I know Mike well enough to know you're speaking Mike's language there. What do you think of that, Mike?
Well, I think back to mikvah and getting to civic engagement sort of on the back end, meaning that you start with student voice and you start with how do you ignite their passion, the kids' passion? What's your story? What are you concerned about in the world? And then linking their story and their passion to the civic engagement on the back end, right?
Yeah,
this is what we want to do, right? And this is, and then you start getting, and that's where the teacher is so important in terms of how to facilitate that, how to iterate that into not only the civic engagement, but also the what you might want to do in a job or career. And that's why we were able to sort of straddle civic engagement with career development. And that led to so many partnerships with business, right? Because again, they're interested in more of an abundance model too with education. I've talked to many CEOs, and guess what? No one cares about SAT scores or AP pass rates. What they care about are those durable skills. Can a kid who graduates from high school or college manage a project, work with people, deliver, all of these things that are not emphasized in schools. And it is the contrast between a culture of scarcity versus this culture of talent and abundance that we need to release.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pent up energy with young people. It's not that they are passive and they don't care. They care about a lot of stuff, but they don't see that reflected in what's taught.
I have a campaign slogan for Democrats based on Mike's work, but also Ted Dintersmith, a venture capitalist who Mike knows that went into education with Sir Ken Robinson, he has a great TED Talk where about 15 years ago, he started to chart his kid, what would happen in his kid's school. And he had 3 lines. Was it relevant to what they'll need later in life? Was it irrelevant? And was it harmful? And when he charted his kid over the next couple of months, the biggest things, there's like 1 thing relevant and about 20 things irrelevant and about 10 things that were harmful, like killing kids' curiosity, right? And teaching them obedience, not critical thinking. But this gets back to, I think what you've done so well, Mike, is you actually make school relevant again. for kids, and that matters. And when you do that, and so I just wonder if that's our slogan for Democrats. Let's make school relevant again, because kids.
I love that. And the other thing too, in terms of engagement and relevant, it's connected to mental health too, right? If 70% of America's high school seniors are bored with school, right, and they think it's because it's irrelevant, right, that there's a correlation there with mental health and sense of stress and anxiety and all those things, right? And a lot of it because kids are not, by the time they graduate in America, they're really, there's no really self-awareness of what they want to do in life. Even the top kids that go on to Ivy League or the top UCs, if you ask them why, what is your why, they can't articulate that. They might want to be a doctor, but they don't know why, other than it's making a lot of money. It's not really attached to something deeper, and this is the missing piece.
Well, that's what I'm fearful of. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but I suspect graduating seniors now out of high school are going into business in huge numbers.
Oh, yes.
Because they're worried. And then when they're worried, well, I better make some money, if I'm going to survive and all.
Absolutely.
That's dangerous too, just to have that, that avenue, that path open to them. And as well, it is open, but as they have them see that as their only path.
Well, I had dinner. I was fortunate to have 2 dinners in Washington recently. One with the president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, who has a teenage son, and he looked at me and he said, "Look, I don't think America's ready for the disruption that's starting." Right? He was talking about AI and all of the job situation. He used the word jagged in terms of the disruption across business sectors. And the question is, what are you going to do about that, right? This is a big problem and America's not ready for it. He was talking about unemployment, underemployment, when young people disconnect, and also the middle class, right? The shrinking middle class, when they no longer believe that the American dream is possible, we have a big problem, And then the other piece, I met with the folks at the American Federation of Teachers in NEA, and AFT was saying, "Look,
what is NEA, Michael, for the
National Education Association, the largest teachers union, one of the largest and most powerful unions across America." And the American Federation of Teachers is also one of the biggest unions. And they were saying, look, they've done polling for decades. And this is the first time, David, that education is not in the top 5 issues with Americans. Yeah. So you have a president who's anti-education, anti-science, coupled with the growing number of young people who are disconnected from education because it's no longer relevant. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter who's in charge. It's been the same drumbeat. We've got a serious problem if we want to post-Trump, think about post-Trump, organize Americans to support education in America, and they're not gonna put tax money in there if it's not even in the top 5, right? And I love Brian making education relevant again, because we've lost our way. And because of people, I'm sorry, like Mr. Duncan or whomever the Democrats have put out in front. I had the president of the NEA in my office last year in Anaheim. She was blown away by seeing teachers teach the 5 C's in classrooms, right? And I asked her point blank, did Kamala Harris have a plan for education? And of course, the answer was no. Mm-hmm. We've got a big problem. It was more of the same. And so,
how much of that, Mike, is fear? I think there's a window to work with the teachers unions because they're sort of bargaining for the common good, kind of a phrase that came out of Chicago.
I agree.
when Duncan actually was I actually thought Duncan did a very good job as CEO of schools, considering the context, but he also had a strong union fighting him, which I think that tension was healthy. That union was taken over by kind of Bernie Sanders type folks who started negotiating for the common good, the community good, not just for their wages and salaries. And that movement in Chicago has spread to many unions, many other teachers unions. And I think that gives us a window with which to get unions on board with innovation. What was your most successful innovation with the teachers union? I know we're in overtime here, but I wanted to get a union question in. How did you get the union to go along with some of your really innovative strategy?
I think yes, and I would say yes. The tension that Arnie Duncan brought in with the unions was a way forward too. That was good tension for the most part. So in Anaheim, there were a couple things like we built an urban farm charged with solving food deserts in America, right? And we took the COVID monies to create this farm. And that repurposed some of the teachers. Initially, the union was against that, right? Because it was out of their, a traditional way of looking at teaching. And I think that was a way forward, being innovative. And I think now many union leaders, they would agree that we need to be more innovative. We need to make school more relevant, and we need to push from the bottom up and rethink how we allocate resources. It's not just about wages and benefits, although that's foundational, no question. But it's also about how do we rethink the role of teachers? How can we get out of that one teacher, one classroom to have more of a collaborative construct, not only with fellow teachers, but with students? How do we work across content? Because we're very siloed. If we're going to solve climate change in the world, we have to think beyond physics and chemistry and English and history. They've got to be cross content teachers, right? And then the use of AI. How do we use AI to elevate the human capacity? Going back to where the Pope is from, and there are a growing number of teachers who understand that they're not about pushing are firewalling AI out from public schools. They do realize that AI can be brought in to uplift the human condition. And so I think there's a lot of room with working with America's unions. It can only be solved. This problem of education can only be solved with the unions side by side. And I'm talking across America. But also I would say this, the world of work and the business community also needs to be part of the solution so we can really create this culture of abundance in our schools.
David, I'm going to end with you here. You fought against NAFTA when did NAFTA pass? 91?
93.
93. In some ways, I feel like we're at a NAFTA moment again with AI and the educational system.
Definitely. Definitely. NAFTA was an economic model that built from the top. And by the time it got down, there wasn't anything there for everybody else. And we have the same political problem, Mike. Even Democratic administrations were terrible on trade. They were absolutely blinded on it. I'm talking about Clinton and Obama to some extent. So we've got to find ways that will connect with people. I think one of the reasons that Bernie Sanders has been so successful is because he sometimes sees that and isn't afraid to go after it. And I want him to speak on education a little bit more, but on the trade stuff and some other pieces, climate, he's been very good. And it's great to have leaders like we had in Francis, but more importantly right now in Leo. That encyclical was a very significant piece of this debate, and it's a good jumping off point for those of us who care about that aspect of AI.
Maybe this has been one of my favorite shows with you two. And Mike, thanks so much for coming on. I think we got to come back and do this again and do a show on AI in the future of how do we build the justice and the Pope's encyclical. So let's, if you don't mind, can we invite you back later in this summer, Mike, and we'll all read the full encyclical and have a discussion.
Love to do that, gentlemen. Love to do that, and keep it going.
Okay.
Have
Nice
a
to
great,
see you. Thank you.
thanks, Mike.
Thank
Have
you.
a great Sunday.